Good morning and welcome to the LGBTQ Northwest Indiana and PFLAG Crown Point TV. And your hosts are Mari Victoria and Elizabeth Menning. So welcome to our show.
Hi,
And
Bill. Thank you.
at
Good
this
morning,
point,
Bill.
good morning, and it's a beautiful. If you like hot, sunny, humid weather, this is a great day, isn't it? Uh, so when I'll just go ahead and hand it over to you. I imagine, we closed up June, kind of interesting June, Pride Month. Bad
Yes,
things, and
indeed.
that you couldn't really celebrate in the way that you should with the Pride parades. But there were some causes for celebration, right?
Yes,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
yes.
some definite celebration. I mean, some legal things happened. The Supreme Court victory, and but let me turn it over to you and tell us some news.
Okay.
All
Well,
right.
once again, welcome to LGBTQ Northwest Indiana and PFLAG Crown Point Northwest Indiana TV.
We're coming to you every couple of weeks, right now on Thursdays at 11 a.m. Central.
And produced by the Bill and Collie Show. My name is Amari Victoria. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
And I'm Elizabeth Menny, also she, her, hers. So today our content, well, every day we do the topics and news that are important to the LGBTQ and ally community here in Northwest Indiana. So whether you identify as a member of the lesbian, gay, bi, pansexual, transgender, queer, or questioning community yourself, or if you know somebody who is a member of the community, or if you are struggling to accept or learn about supporting somebody in the community, this show is for you. So each of our programs has different segments in it. There will always be a featured topic, sometimes an interview or presentation. Today, we are going to, again, be covering gender identity, and if we have time, also gender expression. We're going to give some highlights from recent news events related to LGBTQ topics. We're going to talk about the importance of voting this year and give some brief regional announcements, and then spotlight some of our really important resources.
And now for the news. First story today is about a 90-year-old who comes out because he can't forget the man he fell in love with 70 years ago. Kenneth Belts, a resident of Colorado, has been in the closet for almost a century, but the self-isolation due to the coronavirus pandemic, he started writing his life story. Apparently he had much free time, as a lot of us do now. And that brought back memories of the love of his life, a man named Philip. He fell in love with him back in the 1950s. He ultimately married a woman and had a daughter with his wife, but they later divorced. And he never came out because he didn't have the courage to face society at that time. So he just went ahead and buried it. A few weeks ago, though, he was talking to his daughter, who is a lesbian, and he told her about Philip. It was the first time that he ever mentioned that he was gay, and he followed that with coming out to his entire family in via emails. He said he got lots of positive messages of support, even though he was afraid of how people would react. He was very concerned because he needed people, and he couldn't stand the thought of losing them just because he decided to finally be who he really was.
Happens all too often.
His daughter's wife, Tracy, said, he seems to be making up for lost time and is really owning it, which is fantastic.
Can you show them this picture? See if you can show this picture. So there he is. All right.
Our second story is an interesting one. If anyone's familiar with the home buying or home assessing company called Zillow, they have decided to start showing you details about the LGBTQ protections, existent or non-existent, in their listings. Uh, Only 22 states and the District of Columbia have laws against housing discrimination that include sexual orientation and gender identity. In 2020, however, unfortunately, many parts of the United States, LGBTQ plus home shoppers still face housing discrimination. Dawn Lyon, Xylo's Chief Corporate Relations Officer, says, "That's why we strongly support federal level protections as part of the Quality Act. Listings will now show information for housing, employment, and public accommodations. This information is broken out into sexual orientation and gender identity, since some locales only cover gay, bisexual, and lesbian residents." Our next,
Was Indiana in that group?
I did check in Indiana address, and the results of that, of course, were no protections for sexual orientation or gender identity. I don't know how the federal ruling will impact that, however. Next story is about a musical group that are known before as the Dixie Chicks. They have decided to take off the word Dixie to be sensitive about the protesting and Black Lives Matter and all of the ingrained Southern racist things. So now they'll just be known by the Chicks. And also recently they came out with a new song called March March. The video for that new song is of civil rights protests throughout history. And the lyrics of the song touch on racial justice, climate change, and even name checks bisexual Parkland mass shooting survivor Emma Gonzalez. The video, it's a video montage. It has footage from LGBTQ rights protests, police confrontations, memorials to transgender women, suffragettes, and Black Lives Matter protests.
Wow.
At the end of the video, the names of Black people killed by police violence scroll across the screen over the solo. This list is remarkably extensive, and it's a very powerful video. The group's social media has all been updated, and if you were to go to their website, you would see the message, "If your voice held no power, they wouldn't try to silence you." Additionally, another group that has a Southern connection, Lady Antebellum, has also decided that they will rename themselves, and in this case, they're going to be known as Lady A. Here's a very good news sort of article about a small town, Watertown, New York, where it's a small town, only about 25,000 citizens. But what happened there, that City Hall had been flying a pride flag, and a person tore that flag down and basically threw it away. These citizens of the town were quite angry, mostly because they feel that they are an inclusive community. And while they were out to protest, they got news that they had apprehended a culprit of this crime. One of the organizers, Seth Hill, said, "It doesn't matter if you're part of the LGBTQ community or if you're straight, Republican, Democrat, we're all here together to show we will not stand for hate and love will prevail." His partner and co-organizer, Sexton Reese, also said, "I just want this to be a message to even the youth that are driving by in the back seats of the car to know that if you are part of the LGBTQIA community, you are accepted, you are loved, and we are here for you." And our last story, I don't know if you can see the picture I've got here of a statue with a pride flag hanging off the top. That statue is the Ukrainian motherland statue in Kiev. And Ukrainian LGBTQ activists used a drone to hoist a pride flag up to the top of this statue and actually hang it on the upheld sword that the statue has. This statue is highly venerated in the Ukraine and is slightly higher than the Statue of Liberty.
Here, you mean taller?
Yeah, taller. Probably says higher. While homosexuality is legal in Ukraine, the country is not welcoming to LGBTQ people. In 2017, a small group of activists who were trying to draw attention to the rampant anti-LGBTQ sentiments were violently attacked by thugs who burned their flag. Because of that, pride parades have been disallowed due to fears of a violent response. And those that have gone on have either resulted in attacks or were so heavily guarded that they had more police present than protesters. The Ukraine's patriarch Filaret went on TV and blamed coronavirus on marriage equality. Filaret said that the coronavirus was, quote, God's punishment for the sins of men, the sinfulness of humanity. He followed that up with the statement, first of all, I mean same-sex marriage. Activists posted the footage of the online flag being hoisted onto the statue with the hashtag Mom will understand and support.
So it's interesting that you brought up a Ukrainian article, because we were able to watch the virtual pride, the global virtual pride that happened on June 27th. And it was absolutely amazing to see representatives from so many countries and so many walks of life be sharing in this celebration of coming together, even though we have to stay apart. And it was just phenomenal to see these people around the world. And it really brought a great perspective to our daily life and what we're trying to do here and what our LGBTQ community and ally community are experiencing locally. It just really created a great perspective.
I agree with you. It was an amazing program. We watched it all day long. There were people who just were part of pride organizations who just had members of their organizing
their board or their
board
planners.
Just talk, introduce themselves, and then all the way up to professional artists doing musical renditions or dances, drag shows.
Mm-hmm.
But what it did for me, it was very, it made me feel good in that, because we don't hear a lot about what's going on with organizations who are supporting pride around the world. It brought it home that the LGBTQ community is everywhere, all around the world, and that in some regards, there are people who have much more difficult struggles existing in those countries than we do here in the United States. But it was very refreshing to see that people all over the world are striving for equality and equity for the LGBTQ community.
And I really enjoyed seeing all the political leaders from these different countries speak in support and affirmation of the community. It was really great. So it's very, very important to vote this year. So we will be encouraging you every time to register to vote. We will be providing these resources as well as other resources on our websites and social media platforms as well. But you can register online, and we'll make this available, but https www.indianavoters.com. You just need a valid Indiana driver's license or a state issued identification card. The online services, you can submit a new voter registration. You can update an existing voter registration. You can validate your voter registration status, find your polling location, learn about provisional ballot status, find your county contact information, and determine who is on my ballot for an upcoming election. So we really, really do encourage you to register to vote. And the PFLAG National Organization has a wonderful wealth of resources. We attended a webinar just earlier this week. And if you go to pflag.org/PFLAG Votes Toolkit, you'll find just an incredible wealth of information and resources. So please, voting is very, very important. I think there were only 2/3 of the eligible voters last time actually voted, and it's very important for the LGBTQ and ally community to get out there and make your voice heard. A lot of people think that their vote won't matter. It will, absolutely will. Even one vote can make a difference. If you don't know who your candidates are, this website will help, and then some of the resources that we'll be providing will also help. And anything to add on that, Amari?
Just a couple of things. One of the statistics I recently saw was that of all the eligible voters in this country, over 100 million people did not vote in the last election. That means only about a third of the people in this country actually took the time to vote. It's this time around, it's extremely crucial that you get registered and you get out to your polling places if that's what we need to do, and do it, or with any luck, we will be able to do it through the mail. And the other thing, I don't remember the number specifically, but there is a large portion of the LGBTQ community who also aren't even registered to vote or voted in the last election. And we need to bring our voice to our government and let them know that we want people in place who are going to take measures to improve the situation for LGBTQ people as well as other marginalized groups.
All right. Bill, do you have anything to add about the global pride or voting?
We can't hear you, Bill.
Probably because my dog was barking. I turned my microphone down, but I think Dexter got out on the air anyway. I apologize for those who heard him. Voting, just a little plug here. We are going to have the folks from Rise on, who is an organization that's funded by the organization escapes me now. They're
Legacy Foundation.
Beg pardon?
Legacy Foundation.
Thank you. And I invited them to come on our show and repeatedly until Election Day, so we can reiterate to people what alternatives they have to vote. Because, as you well know, one of our elected officials, who I don't like mentioning them, said that mail-in was invalid, that it's going to be fraudulent. And what did that cause a lot of people not to do? To vote. I mean, we saw a increase in person, but with the pandemic happening, and that's an option that people would have felt comfortable with. But so one thing I just want to plug is we are going to be doing a lot of education on the Bill and Kelly Show with regard to voting. As things change, as the pandemic causes issues, we're going to make sure people know how to vote, as far as bringing up a online ballot or a paper ballot, and just educating with the process. So yeah, we're going to be doing that a lot, because we personally feel, both Kelly and I, people need to vote. And this election, there could not be more important election in our lifetime as this. And you see what's going on internationally regarding rights, and here in the United States, there couldn't be a more important time to step up for democracy and defend it with all our vigor.
That's
Absolutely.
Great. We'll make sure to share all those links as you do your shows. Yeah. We'll share those links as well.
Yeah, definitely. And they're going to be coming on and explaining to our listeners and all the different options, and and hopefully we'll be able to get them on a couple of times before election, just to keep it fresh in people's
That's
minds.
great.
I do have a awesome picture to share with you
Okay.
guys. If you don't, I don't know if this is appropriate or not. It has a lot to do with Pride Month, and
Okay.
I'm hoping this is going to work because I've never shared anything on Zoom before. So let me see what's going to go on here. Um, well, that didn't exactly work.
Well, we see a picture.
You see a picture of my two granddaughters?
Yes.
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 Okay, that I've got to say, I'm extremely proud of my daughters, and and this is one that one post that she did, and she has been doing this continuously throughout Pride
Oh,
Month,
that's great.
and I have no doubts that Sydney and Cam are going to be probably some of the most open-minded, loving girls on the face of the earth.
Oh,
So
that's great.
yeah, yeah. So they're dolls, aren't they?
They are.
Especially that Sydney. Oh boy, look out for her. Now, if I could figure out how to switch back. Okay, you are stop share. Okay, that was simple.
Excellent.
Now
There
I'll
you
probably
go.
hear from my daughter, "Why did you do that, Dad?" And I said, "Because I'm proud of you. That's why I did it." Oh boy. So
Great.
I had to share that.
All
Well,
right.
thank you for that, Bill.
Oh, no problem.
We are going to launch into our feature presentation, or feature topic, I should say. And I think that we'll have to divide it into two different pieces because we have a lot of material, both on gender identity and gender expression. And of course, there's even more after that. But we will have, vary our topics, and we will be bringing in some. Actually, we're kind of excited. We'll be bringing in some local people that have been advocates and activists in this region before us, and we're going to have them on the show here soon. So this drawing, whoa, sorry,
Keep
this
it in front of
drawing,
you.
yeah, okay, right in front of me. You can almost see it.
Okay.
It shows a person with a brain and a heart and a star, all kind of emphasized. Gender identity is what is found, basically identified in the brain, or not identified, but located in the brain, just being a person's internal sense of being a man or woman or anything in between. The orientation and attraction is where the heart is in the chest, a term to describe sexual and a romantic attraction to others. Sex, birth sex, biological sex is in the star in the groin, and that is the labels that are given to somebody at birth based on their body parts. And then gender expression is the whole person, the whole body and mannerisms. It's the way that the person communicates or presents their gender identity to others.
Again, like Elizabeth said, gender identity is our internal concept of our gender. Gender expression is distinct from gender identity. And please don't confuse the two. And we hope that our material in this program today will give you the stark information about identity and expression. And there's another term I'd like to review, gender transition. That is essentially our quest to make our outside match our inside. And we do that by having our transition journey. And that can involve many things. We're going to talk about a lot of those things as we get into our discussion.
All right, here are we already there? Okay. All right, so this can also include a gender identity can also include a lack of gender or concept of gender. It could be the lack of gender perception, where somebody doesn't identify with either the binary genders of man or woman. There can be great stress caused by misalignment. We also call it dysphoria. If your gender associated with the sex assigned at birth and your true gender identity are mismatched, it can be a tremendous cause of stress, angst, depression, all kinds of bad things. Gender identity is not the same as sexual orientation. And a sexual orientation, you can't assume based on somebody's gender identity. Gender identity can change over time. It isn't consistent, doesn't have to be consistent throughout somebody's life. It can evolve over time. And discoveries about your true gender can happen at any time and are always valid.
Today, I will use information that I found on a website called genderspectrum.org.
It's a great program, great group.
There's a lot of good information there. I recommend, if you'd like to read more, to go to that website. The understanding of gender has evolved over time. Younger generations have a distinctly different idea than older generations. And this evolution of the understanding of gender affects children, families, businesses, institutions. Some statistics for you. In 2015, there was a poll called the Fusion Millennial Poll. The majority of adults between the ages of 18 and 34 reported that they see gender as a spectrum rather than a binary concept. In a 2017 Harris poll, they found 12% of millennials identify as transgender or gender nonconforming.
Gender nonconforming just means, again, they don't adhere to the societal confirmation of male, female, man, woman.
A global marketing communications company by the name of J. Walter Thompson Intelligence did some research, and they found that 56% of those between the ages of 13 and 20 already know someone who uses gender neutral pronouns.
And you may have noticed that we, again, use our pronouns when we introduce ourselves. So even if, like, for instance, my gender has never been in question for me, I will still tell you what my pronouns are, because you shouldn't make any assumptions just based on the way that I look or what you know about me.
That's absolutely right. You can't stress that enough, that all along, due to societal norms, societal pressures, we instantly make assumptions about persons' gender and other things that we really, really shouldn't.
We'll address that a lot more when we talk about gender expressions.
So the use of pronouns, whether it's on something like this, whether it's a conversation with a coworker or a friend,
or a line in your signature, your email signature.
Those are all good ways to promote understanding about one's gender identity, and also for those who don't identify with the LGBTQ community, it's a good way to show that you understand that, and it's one step in becoming a better ally.
Yes, it helps mainstream that practice and that understanding.
One of the other changes that's happened over time as we understand gender better is that companies are now backing off of or removing their marketing that is targeted towards boys or girls, in an effort to remove that tradition.
It's really funny, though, as I saw a Facebook post not too long ago, one of my friends shared with me. It had a little dog costume that was done in the rainbow stripes, like you see kind of behind us. And the description was Pride dog costume for girls. So it's like, even that wasn't inclusive. So yes. It just came to mind. All right. So we are absolutely flooded with gender messaging from the day we're born. And children traditionally haven't had many opportunities to contemplate their gender or even know that that's an okay thing to do. So gender literacy is really important. If we can provide children and adults with a basic gender literacy, they'll have a better understanding about determining their gender throughout their lives.
And that actually gives them the opportunity to actually contemplate their own gender.
Yeah, and I think that's important. We read this as for children, but I think it's just as important for adults, like I mentioned. So gender is affected by societal influence about education, career, relationships, and more. And I have got, so just real quick, some of the questions that you can ask yourself, what is your gender identity today? What was your gender identity when you were in first grade? This is kind of an idea. What do you think your gender identity would be 100 years from now? Just include their thought.
There's probably many more questions that you can ask. So a gender spectrum has their own concept about gender, and they call it their dimensions of gender. There's a complex interrelationship between three components or dimensions. The first dimension is body. That's how we experience our own body, how society genders bodies, and how our bodies affect how others interact with us. The second dimension is identity, and identity is the name, label, or description that we use to convey our true gender. Examples are the binary man and woman, the non-binary gender queer or gender fluid, and the ungendered or agender. The name, label, or description used has meaning to it assigned by the person who's using it, and it may not actually have the same meaning for someone else. And the last and third dimension, social gender, includes how we exhibit our gender, how our gender is perceived by others, and how it's shaped by individuals, society, culture, and community. Gender roles and expectations are part of social gender and used by society to enforce conformity to gender norms.
And as you know, there's many different societies and cultures, and many of them treat this differently and have multiple genders and language around that. So, but the level in which these three dimensions of body, identity, and social gender are in harmony, it's related to one's comfort in their gender. So by age 4, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, most children already have a stable sense of their gender identity, age 4. So language for gender, it's evolved greatly, but it still limits our ability to discover or create the language that best describes our internal experience of gender. As language evolves, so does one's name for their gender evolve. So maybe not their gender is not changing, but their language is to describe it is changing.
And that the language is really important. I think that's part of the literacy for children. I know as a 4, 5, 6-year-old myself, many of the terms that we use today to describe our gender didn't exist. So it's very important, in my opinion, number one, to give young adults, children, the opportunity to learn these terms and to not pressure those children into conforming with anything in particular.
Or to be pigeonholed or anything. And there are some great organizations and websites that, again, have a wealth of resources, either, for parents, for youth, for teens, for teachers, for schools. So we'll be sharing those too as time goes on. So expression of gender, it is, as Amari said, it's difficult for them to express their gender outside of social norms. And we all have our own concept about expression of gender, like long hair for girls and short hair for boys. And many times we make our assumptions based on our own experiences about what a person's gender identity is. And gender expression and gender identity are patently different. So all of these concepts are interrelated, but they're all also independent.
So this harmony that I spoke of earlier, or Elizabeth spoke of earlier, we want that harmony. We want our minds and bodies to be congruent with one another.
That's kind of being your authentic self. That's part of being your authentic self.
Absolutely. So these things that would be included that would cause this harmony to happen would be that we are comfortable with our bodies, that we have the language to adequately describe our internal sense of gender, and expressing ourselves through our clothing, our mannerisms, etc. And most importantly, really importantly, is that we are seen by others as we see ourselves.
So the process of this congruency, finding it, occurs constantly as we grow and gain insight about ourselves, and through exploring and contemplation. Finding gender congruence is true for everyone, but again, like Amari was saying, it causes great angst when we do not experience it. So for transgender, non-binary, and agender people, the process of finding gender congruence is typically called transitioning.
So let's talk a little bit about transitioning. It is definitely an important experience in a person's life, and some of the ways that transitioning can occur. And remember, everyone's journey is different.
Mm-hmm. And that's okay.
And that's perfectly okay. And actually, to the extent that measures are taken to bring congruence is also up to the individual.
Yes.
So the first part of transitioning can be social transitioning. Usually that consists of changing your social identities, which is like taking on a label to describe your gender identity, perhaps changing your name, perhaps changing but declaring for sure your pronouns, and changing your hair and clothing, etc. Another way to transition, or another component of transitioning, is the use of hormone therapy, or in the case of prepubescent young adults, that would be called hormone blockers, and those are both used to. What did I say?
Hormone blocker. It might be the same. You might also hear them called puberty blockers.
Well, yeah. It could be called hormone blockers because, of course, the therapy that you're giving is actually blocking your secondary development of your secondary sex characteristics. Another way that transitioning can be achieved is through medical intervention, that's surgery, and that is to add, remove, or modify parts of the body to match your gender's physical characteristics in a better way. And then lastly, part of transitioning are the legal measures in which you would change your documentation, such as your driver's license, your birth certificate, your passport, and as I found out in my name and gender marker change, everything else, credit cards, bank accounts, on many online things you may want to also change to achieve that harmony.
The one thing, though, that's really important to keep in mind, too, is that I know this topic doesn't apply to all people who identify as LGBTQ, There are some for whom the question of gender identity is not an issue, and that is okay too. And we will be getting to topics that are relevant to all segments of the population. So don't worry about that. We will get to your topics. So you have some final notes on this topic, Amari?
Yes. First one is that gender is personal. Our body, our identity, our expression is part of it, but also part of it are things like your race, your ethnicity, your class, faith, family history.
And it is not sexual orientation. They are two distinct characteristics.
We will reiterate that.
Yes.
Also, just like you shouldn't assume someone's gender identity, you also should not assume anyone's sexual orientation based on their gender expression. That would be a mistake. The only way that you can tell a person's gender identity, of course, is to have them tell you what it is.
And it's not like you really need to know it either. Right? I mean,
well, if you're talking about sexual orientation, yes, but gender identity, I think that congruence, that harmony is something that you want to achieve, especially in light of having
yes, you want
the
people to
community to
like you
view you as you view yourself.
Right.
Gender diversity has existed since the dawn of time, and unfortunately, historically, it's met with non-acceptance, violence, discrimination.
At least in our type of society. There have been other cultures there that have been very embracing.
Also, one thing that's really important for us to contemplate is how we can think about what being diverse really means and to validate other person's experiences. And the net result of that will be greater acceptance.
Yes. So we've just spent a lot of time talking about primarily gender identity, but we also teased you with some of the other topics. Of course, the sex assigned at birth is the one that other people assign to you based on your physical appearance. We got gender identity.
Yeah, we just talked in great depth about gender identity.
Yeah. So it's your internal sense of being a man, a woman, both, neither is self-identified. It may not match the sex assigned at birth. Probably in one of our next sessions, we're going to talk a lot about gender expression, masculine, feminine, androgynous. It's the way a person outwardly expresses their gender identity, consciously or unconsciously, physically and socially. Probably dive a little bit into, or not maybe dive, but touch on gender roles, the stereotypes of the masculine, feminine, gender neutral gender roles. And
of course, sexual orientation and attraction, be that emotional, affectional, sexual, romantic, can't forget that one.
There's a lot of different parts of attraction.
Yes.
Or flavors of attraction.
Yeah.
So
I do want to mention something during this conversation. This kind of has something to do with it. We had an author on 2 weeks ago, actually, Vivian Probst, and kind of interesting. She wrote a novel in gender neutral language completely.
Oh, wow.
And she's gone on to do the study in trying to teach other authors and how to do the same thing, what pronouns to use and whatnot. But she was coming at it from a different angle. Her view was the language, the English language, is extremely male oriented. Everything is based on he, whether it be she and he, and so that type of thing. But it's kind of interesting to know that someone went to the extent of actually writing an entire novel. In fact, I think she's coming out with several novels that are written in a gender neutral language.
What a great exercise.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Using gender neutral language is not always easy because we have been so conditioned in the binary he, she.
Mm-hmm.
And in the default to he.
But I find it very interesting that we, in a lot of ways, use gender neutral talk without even knowing it. My example is I've been cut off in traffic by another driver. I don't know what they were doing. I can't see them. I don't know what their gender is, or sex for that matter. So I use the gender neutral term they, and that happens an awful lot with everyone.
Well, you could take that even further. If I were to record what Kelly says when someone cuts her off, I think that's gender neutral as well. I don't think that particular word is associated with male or female, although it's greatly opinionated that that is usually a male, but we won't go for sake of discussion.
And I tend, if I'm talking to Amari about somebody that I see, I will usually say that person such and such instead of saying he or she, because if I use the pronouns he or she when I don't know that person, I'm making assumptions. Mm-hmm. So I've started saying that person, and I've even started referring to myself as a person instead of a woman because I don't know, I'm just trying to do the gender neutral thing more.
Well, it is interesting because as we move forward as a society, judgment based upon so many factors, and I'm even wondering if we will get to a point where we disallow any identification of race or anything having to identify with a person's trait that really, in a lot of cases, is not controllable. And so it's going to be interesting as we move along as society and where we go. But so
that would be the epitome if we could learn to treat each other as people and not have to make judgments or assumptions about anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I've got to say, and some people have heard this ad nauseum from me, I grew up in such a diverse neighborhood. And I've got to say, sexual identity or, that conversation didn't happen back in the early 60s. But, I grew up in a area where I just didn't know any different. It's like I grew up with African Americans, Greek family, Jewish family, Hispanic family, all within the same block. And, I didn't know it was any different till people started bringing differences up as an issue. And I'm like, well, I go to my dad and say, why are they doing that? And my dad say, well, they're basically idiots. And and that's one of the words Kelly describes drivers when they cut her off.
Just one of the words.
Yeah, just one of them.
I think as when we're young, our culture, our background, and our families, and possibly even our educational system, have a lot to do with how we learn to describe and treat other people. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's not necessarily good.
And sometimes it's very subtle. It's one of the implicit biases, or just, it's not like somebody that's called out, but you can just tell by the way somebody's talking how they feel.
Well,
just a couple minutes left.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I just want to make one more comment about gender neutral pronouns. If you use them, it gets easier. People shouldn't be afraid to try them out and start using them, because it does become easier to do over time.
And again, just as part of your affirming somebody who is LGBTQ, using their proper real pronouns and their real name is really important in validating them as their authentic self. So we wanted to do some quick regional announcements as far as Pride updates. I hope people were able to see some of the global Pride and some of the Indy virtual Pride. There are still a few Indiana Pride events that are supposed to be taking place, including NWI Pride, Northwest Indiana Pride. We are still scheduled for September 12th, but right in the throes of decision making and and that type of thing. And let's see, I think Fort Wayne is still on track for the end of September, and Spencer, which is down south, is still on track for October. We had a great, successful Love is Love 5K on June 21st. Thank you very much to Paul Stothko and Crazy Leg Race Series for putting that together. And to, you know, if you're interested in finding out a lot about these types of things that we've been talking about, again, attending a virtual support group or community group is really a great way to do that, and in a safe environment, and to interact with people who are either like you or have been where you are, or who want to follow in your footsteps, or, you know, anything. It's really a great opportunity. And there's a variety of virtual support meetings, not only the PFLAG Crown Point chapter, but also Pride initiatives, and there's other groups out there as well that are having support meetings.
Also, there are many organizations who are offering webinars or virtual town halls to discuss pertinent topics in today's environment, even around Northwest Indiana. So look out for those. You might just learn something.
And then as for our spotlight for some national resources, the Trevor Project. Oh, look, I didn't disappear. Oh, yes, I did. The Trevor Project is a really, really good resource. It's targeted for youth up to 24, but they have some different types of programs. It was started as a, you know, crisis hotline. So they focus on ending suicide among LGBTQ youth, and they really can help the youth, but they also provide a lot of resources. So there's a Trevor Lifeline where you can call, Trevor Text where you can text, a Trevor Chat where you can just do online instant messaging, Trevor Space, which is a social networking site for LGBTQ youth under 25 and their friends and allies. And then suicide prevention and general information in their resources. And we'll be sharing that information, those links as well. Other resources you might be interested in is the LGBTQ youth resources of the American Psychology Association, Gender Spectrum, from whom Amari took some material for today, GLSEN, which has a safe space kit, and they do a lot of work with schools, GLAAD, GLAAD, which deals with LGBTQ representation in media. And let's see, there's a Rainbow Reading List. There's a company called Live Out Loud. There's the Welcoming Schools organization, Teaching Tolerance, Lambda Legal. So we'll be providing links to all these on our websites.
On the topic of suicide prevention, the FCC had prior okayed the use of the 3-digit number 988 for the suicide prevention hotline. There's one final decision that needs to be made coming up here in July.
Yeah, mid-July.
And once that goes into effect, you won't have to remember the 800 number. You'll only have to remember 988.
Yep. And one of their quotes was that 988 will save lives, helping Americans in crisis connect to counselors trained in suicide prevention is one of the most important things we can do at the FCC. So remember, just in these times, they're crazy with the coronavirus and everything else going on in our world, in our country. A mental health provider is just a phone call away. So if you're feeling overwhelmed and you have thoughts that you might harm yourself or others, there's this great infographic. It gives a suicide prevention resources, and then on the far side here, it lists the PFLAG Crown Point and LGBTQ Northwest Indiana phone numbers. It includes information about the Trevor Project, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, Trans Lifeline, and the Sage LGBT Elder Hotline. So I think, Amari.
Well, another important topic that I'd like to briefly touch on is our smoking cessation efforts. Due to issues such as dysphoria and non-acceptance, the LGBTQ community is typically more susceptible to substance abuse, including smoking and vaping. If you are trying to quit smoking, the Indiana Quit Line, their number is 800-QUIT-NOW, and that is available both in English and Spanish.
Again, it's 800-QUIT-NOW.
And there is a website where you can get more information about the programs offered for smoking cessation. And that website is www.indianaquitline.net.
Yep.
They do offer services like phone counseling, cessation medications, adult and teen programs, and provide referrals. There is a wealth of services, and based on the chapter, so to speak, that you are able to get in touch with, or by state, they may be different.
So our upcoming sessions, like I said, we are going to bring you all things LGBTQ, and we're doing this twice a month right now, so every other Thursday. Our next session will be on July 16th, and then we'll have one July 30th, probably August 13th, and August 27th. So July 16th will be our next show, and hopefully we'll be able to bring some people in to share their stories.
And continue our discussion of the topic of gender expression.
Yep.
And I believe that's all we have for you today.
Well, I would like to share that picture again, not just because I'm a proud daddy, but I found out that you guys could see it, but our viewing audience couldn't. So now it's just going to be the opposite. So you guys won't be able to see it because it's on our stream platform. So there's the little dolls. And yeah, let me see here. Yeah, and the post reads, "When all Americans are treated as equal, no matter who they are or whom they love, we all are more free." And I tell you what, that could not be better time to celebrate that than the 4th of July. And we need to expand our thought process on this 4th of July when we celebrate freedoms. People died on behalf of this country and our freedoms, and we should remember that nothing was qualified in that fight for freedom. And so, and I've got to say to our viewing audience, I am so proud of my daughters and my son for the openness and the way they raise their kids to be loving and caring individuals. So there you have it. Proud daddy moment.
That's great.
So
that's great. Well, thank you again, the Bill and Kelly Show, for producing our program here, and thank you to the program sponsors. Really appreciate this opportunity.
And I guess with that, we will see you all in 2 weeks.
Yep.
And all of you have a safe 4th of July weekend and get out there and enjoy. It's going to be hot, but it's going to be sunny, at least for Saturday. So we'll see after that.
Social distance, mask up.
Social distancing and masks, please. We all want to keep each other safe. And with that, we'll say goodbye for now.
All right.
This episode of The Bill and Callie Show is brought to you by Sip Coffee House 2 in Highland, Indiana on Jewett Avenue. Great coffee, lattes, smoothies, and more. Food and treats you will adore. Small town charm with big city selection. It's Sip Coffee House 2. If it's breakfast, brunch, or lunch you need, Les Cafe is the place to go, indeed. Open 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. 7 days a week. Les Cafe Pancake House, located in Highland, Indiana on Highway Avenue. Les Cafe, where less is more. Promise You Art House, a fun and vibrant place for local artisans to display and sell their creative works. owned and operated by artists for artists. Conveniently located at 8830 Kennedy Avenue in Highland, Indiana. For hours and events, visit pyarthouse.com or follow them on Facebook. Promise You Art House, where creativity reigns.